Hello everyone, and welcome once more to our malicious compliance. Today's story features an unhinged, gun-carrying mega Karen who insists on seeing the manager, a request the original poster not only fulfilled but took a step further. Let's get straight into the story. I operate a small, physical retail store. The business is a hybrid, blending retail sales with services, featuring a showroom filled with merchandise up front and a workshop in the back for repairs and bespoke projects. It is an independent, locally owned enterprise and the center of my world. I founded it after spending years in the employ of others, vowing I would manage things better if I ever had the opportunity. The idea of owning a business seems glamorous until you're the one mopping the floors at night and disputing shipping charges with vendors at 2 in the morning. Still, I adore it. I cherish my regular customers, the daily rhythm, and the small triumphs that come when a client departs completely satisfied. My store policies are straightforward and clearly displayed. A printed document sits on the counter, and a laminated sign is posted near the entrance. In essence, they state, custom orders are non-refundable, a restocking fee applies to opened but resellable items, receipts are required for all exchanges, and we hold the right to deny service to anyone behaving in an aggressive or abusive manner. This isn't because I'm unkind, it's because for a small business, a single disruptive encounter can erase an entire week's profit margin. Most people understand this. Many customers will even gesture to the sign and chuckle if they've forgotten a receipt, saying something like, "My mistake, I'll be back." And while I try my best to be reasonably flexible, every so often, a person arrives determined to stage their own one-act courtroom play right in my shop. This brings us to the mega Karen. She made a boisterous entrance. You can recognize that energy, the kind that suggests a person has been building up an argument in the parking lot and has rehearsed their entire monologue on the way to the door. She was holding a large box we stock, scraping it along the floor as if the scuff marks were a dramatic flourish. A few of my regulars were browsing, and one gentleman was at the counter discussing a custom piece he was commissioning. It had been a pleasant morning. The bell on the door chimed as she shoved it open, and even the bell seemed to regret its existence for a moment. She dropped the box in the center of the room and declared to everyone present that she required an immediate, full refund because the product was both defective and useless. No greeting, no proof of purchase, just pure volume. I shifted into what I refer to as my professional customer service mode, a serene, controlled tone, a non-confrontational posture, and hands kept in plain sight. I requested her receipt and inquired about the issue. She retorted, "It doesn't work. It shut off. I need my money back. All of it." When I asked how long she'd owned it, she replied, "A couple of days." I then asked again if she had the receipt, and she made that expression familiar to every retail employee, that "I don't have a receipt, and I'm about to make that your fault" face. She stated, "I bought it online from you. You should be able to find it. True, I can search for orders, but I need a name, phone number, email, or order number, some piece of information." I explained this to her. She began rattling off common first names, as if I maintained a telepathic directory of every Jennifer in town. I requested an email address. She waved a dismissive hand and said, "Just look up my name. It's in your system." I pulled up our sales system and entered the surname she provided, but no record appeared. When I asked about potential spelling variations or other email addresses, she declared, "I don't share my email." She made this statement while inside my store, having supposedly placed an online order. I allowed that contradiction to hang in the air for a moment, as awkward as an unsolicited silence. I approached it from a different direction. We could process a return if the item were faulty and covered by warranty. But that would require a quick inspection by the manufacturer to verify the defect. This is standard procedure. If it were within our immediate return window and unused, an exchange or refund would be possible, but the item was opened, had clearly been used, and she lacked a receipt. I needed something to link her to a purchase. She was not pleased that I was insisting on actual facts and claimed the item had switched off on its own, nearly injuring someone. The product in question contains no battery, motor, or electronics. It's about as likely to power down by itself as my sales counter is to do my taxes. I asked for clarification. She changed tactics, saying, "It's just garbage. I want my money. Why are you being so difficult?" I assured her I wasn't trying to be difficult, but I simply required proof of purchase and an opportunity to test the item. I offered to take it to my workbench right then to examine it, a process that typically takes just a few minutes. I also explained that if the issue was due to user error or damage from misuse, it wouldn't be considered a manufacturer's defect, and we would need to explore other solutions. That's when she uttered the infamous line. "Get your manager," she commanded, with a tone suggesting she was summoning someone to clean up a cosmic coffee spill. For anyone with experience in small business, this is a classic moment, as half the time the manager is also the proprietor and the very person you're already speaking with. However, I avoid leading with "I'm the owner" unless absolutely necessary. People can treat you differently, and not always for the better. I informed her that I was the manager on duty. She jabbed a finger toward my chest, as if selecting a prize at a carnival booth, and said, "I want the owner. The owner will resolve this." I refused to deal with underlings. Yes, she actually used the word underlings. This is the point where the malicious compliance began to take shape. When a customer demands a manager, I provide one. If they demand the owner, I can provide the owner. Coincidentally, I am the owner. But I'm also aware that when someone attempts to pull rank on me, especially before my regular clientele and after being disrespectful to my staff, in this case, me in a different role, I tend to get creative while staying within the guidelines. I smiled, said, "Just a moment," and walked into the back room. I wasn't going to retrieve anyone, as there was no one else to get. I went to wash my hands, take a moment to compose myself, check my posture in the little mirror by the sink, and retrieve my owner name tag. It's a plain black tag with white lettering that simply says owner. I keep it in a drawer for situations where such clarity is needed. I also collected a copy of our store policies, the order lookup tablet, and a small form I use for documenting incidents. Whenever a situation veers off course, I record it while the details are fresh, a habit that has proven invaluable more than once. I returned to the front, affixed the owner tag to my shirt, and positioned myself on the other side of the counter. Same smile, same composure. She was in the middle of a tirade to a regular customer about how the store's quality had declined since the management changed. For the record, the management has never changed, it has only ever been me. I said, "Hello, I'm the owner. How may I assist you?" Her eyes performed a sequence I've witnessed in people who have just run into a wall they didn't see: surprise, followed by disbelief, then annoyance, all in the span of a heartbeat. She chuckled as if I'd told a terrible joke and said, "No, I need the real owner." I gestured to my name tag. Then, I pointed to the framed business license hanging on the wall behind me, which clearly displays my name. I keep it there because it tends to shorten certain discussions. I calmly reiterated that I am, in fact, the owner. She was not pleased that the cosmos had granted her exact request. She doubled down on her stance, stating she had no time for my games and demanded to speak with someone superior to me. I explained that no one holds a higher position than the owner, unless she preferred to speak with my landlord or my mother. And only one of them would be willing to talk to her. She did not find this amusing. The regular at the counter suppressed a smirk. The other customer browsing the aisles adjusted his stance, as if getting comfortable for a movie. She reached down and slapped the box once more. "Refund. Now." I held up the policy sheet. "I would be glad to process a return if we can verify a defect under warranty and you provide proof of purchase. Without proof of purchase, the best I can offer is store credit for the most recent sale price, less a restocking fee, provided the item is in a condition that allows for resale." I continued, "If it's damaged or has been used beyond a simple test, it must go to the manufacturer for service, and we can help with a warranty claim. However, if there is no defect, it is non-returnable." I delivered this line as if I had recited it 1,000 times, because I have. She claimed she didn't have time for this and that other retailers weren't so difficult. I responded that I couldn't comment on other stores' practices. She then said, "You can look it up with my face." I was just in here. Check your security cameras. I replied, we don't employ facial recognition technology because this is not a dystopian airport, and even if we did, that's not how our return process works. She then used a line that invariably makes my jaw clench. Do you have any idea who I am? I answered, I'm sorry, I do not. She claimed to be acquainted with influential people in the city, including the mayor. The mayor, however, does not oversee retail returns. I once again offered to test the item in the back. If it was defective and within the return period, she would be covered, but I still needed proof of purchase. I reminded her that if it was an online order, we could also find it using the email address on the order. She rolled her eyes so dramatically I feared she might injure herself and snapped, "You're wasting my time." I said, "Get your manager." I looked at my tech. That is me. She made a sound like a tire slowly deflating. By the way, everyone, just a quick interruption here. If you're enjoying these wild retail stories, please remember to like the video and leave some star emojis if you'd like to show your support. Thank you very much. She said, "Fine, if you're the owner, then handle it. Give me my refund." I am unable to issue a refund without proof of purchase and a product evaluation. That is my policy. That's absurd, she declared. That's the official policy, I replied, tapping the document. And this is where the compliance turned malicious. She wanted the owner, and she got the owner. She wanted the rules bent, and the owner refused. She wanted a manager to override the decision, but the manager was the owner who created the rules. She had backed herself into a corner of her own arrogant design. She then began to make vague threats about leaving negative reviews, informing all her friends, and ensuring everyone would learn what kind of establishment you run. I gestured to my stack of business cards. Please make sure you spell the name correctly if you post about us. It's spelled the standard way. This elicited a snort from the regular, which did nothing to improve the atmosphere. I asked her one last time if she wanted me to test the product. She seized the box, mumbled something about incompetence, and began dragging it toward the exit. Halfway there, she stopped, pivoted, and insisted I carry it to her vehicle. She said, "This is heavy. You need to carry it. It's customer service." If you've ever worked on a retail sales floor, you understand that providing random physical help is a significant liability. If I drop the item, if it strikes someone, or if it sustains damage, it instantly becomes my responsibility. We assist with reasonable requests, but carrying an opened, used item to a car after refusing a return is not something I'm eager to do. Still, I'm not heartless. I told her I could get her a dolly to move it to the door herself, something we do frequently. She called me lazy. She then informed me she would be reporting my behavior to the owner. I glanced down at my name tag and said, "Understood." As she reached the door, she turned and delivered her final line. "I'm coming back with my husband, and he won't be as pleasant as I've been." Certain statements act as a trigger for me, and threats of bringing someone else for intimidation are one of them. It's a clear signal. It shows they believe they can escalate the situation with a man and frighten you into breaking the rules. It also signals to me that I should start handling the interaction as if it could become volatile. I said, "For safety and our records, I am now noting that you have threatened to return with another person to escalate this matter. If you do come back, please know that we will not permit any aggressive behavior. If you wish to proceed with a return, bring your receipt." She told me to enjoy being unemployed and departed in a huff. The door made that bell sound again, like a feeble applause. I documented the incident, description, time, what was said, who was present, and so on. The regular at the counter shook his head and commented, "You handled that very well." We completed his order, and the remainder of the day was uneventful. I had hoped that was the end of it. I've encountered dozens of loud individuals who use the "I'll be back with my husband" line and are never seen again. It's usually just for show, part of their script. But she was not, in fact, finished. Later that week, shortly after opening, she reappeared, box in tow, but without her husband. Her demeanor was different, less theatrical, more restrained. She placed the box on the floor and said, "Let's do this correctly. You're going to test it, and then you will issue my refund." Progress. I could work with tested. I replied, "Excellent. Do you have the proof of purchase?" She slid a printed sheet of paper across the counter with the air of someone revealing a winning poker hand. It was a screenshot of a receipt, but it wasn't from my store. It was from a different shop across town. The same item, but a different seller. For a moment, I considered that she might have purchased it there and come here by mistake. But then I saw the date on the receipt and the serial number on the box. They didn't align. I asked if she had perhaps confused her documents, and she replied, "It's the identical product. It shouldn't matter where it was bought." I explained that it absolutely matters, as I can only refund purchases made for my business. Otherwise, I would be using my own funds to cover another store's sale. I offered to test the item and provide her with a report she could use to file a warranty claim with the manufacturer or to facilitate a return at the other store, but I could not accept it without proof it was sold by us. She said, "That's ridiculous. You're all the same." I countered, "We are not." She started to get agitated again, but before she reached full intensity, she paused as if she'd just remembered something. She squinted at me. "Are you the manager?" "I am the owner." "Then solve this." Here we go again. Round 2. I reiterated my position, policy, options, documentation. She managed to keep her composure. She said, "Fine. Test it." I carried the item to my workbench in the back. For those curious, testing it isn't complex. I perform a visual check for misuse, look for any clear damage, attempt to operate it normally, and note any deviations from specifications. It's a simple checklist that takes about 5 to 7 minutes. The item functioned perfectly. There was no defect, not even slight wear. In fact, it appeared to have been used only a few times and then poorly repackaged. I brought it back to the counter and informed her, "No defect found. It operates as designed. Therefore, there's no basis for a warranty claim." She pointed to the box and insisted, "It turned off." I explained once more that it cannot turn off because it never turns on, it has no power source. She then said, "I installed it incorrectly. It is a product that requires no installation, it simply sits." It was like debating with a fog bank. She then requested an exchange. Store credit. I informed her I could only offer store credit if she could prove it was purchased here. She threw her arms up as if trying to cool herself with her own frustration and exclaimed, "This is harassment. You're harassing me." I calmly replied, "I am applying the same policy to you as I do to every other customer." She then demanded, "Get your manager." I tapped my name tag. "Owner." She said, "Get your boss." I replied, "That would be my mother." One of my regulars had come in during this exchange. She shot him a glare, and he suddenly became engrossed in examining a price tag as if it contained the meaning of life. And that's when the situation escalated in a way I have never seen in my entire career. She reached into her large handbag and, instead of a receipt, she withdrew a small handgun. The regular froze. I froze. Another customer in the aisle stumbled backward, knocking an item from a shelf. The world fell silent, except for the internal shriek of 1,000 safety training videos. She wasn't aiming it at anyone, but held it angled downward at her side. But it was out, in my store, and in her possession, which was more than enough. In a very steady voice, she said, "Perhaps now you'll take me seriously. I don't care how tough you believe you are or how many action films you've seen. When a firearm materializes in your small shop, your heart feels like it stops. There is no training for this except don't try to be a hero." My mind raced through a mental checklist: remain calm, do not escalate, avoid sudden movements, keep hands visible, and try to get witnesses to safety if possible. Also, call 911 discreetly if you can, or hope someone else does. I then slowly placed my hands on the counter, palms up, fingers splayed. I took a deep breath that felt like I was swallowing ice. I said, "Okay, we need to slow this down. You need to put that away immediately." She responded, give me my refund. I said, I cannot handle any transaction while a weapon is visible. For both my safety and yours, you must put it away. If you refuse, I will have to ask you to leave. And if you don't leave, I will contact the police. She scoffed, you think I'm afraid of the police? The regular beside me, bless his heart, had already managed to slide his phone up behind a display and was silently on speakerphone with 911. I could hear the faint, distant voice of a dispatcher requesting the address. The regular whispered it. I kept my focus on the customer's hands, not the gun itself, but her hands. I repeated slowly that I was unable to assist her as long as the weapon was out. She hesitated for a moment, and I thought she might put it away, but then her jaw hardened. She said, "This is your last chance." I did the only thing I could think of. I complied with her precise demand in a way that offered no ambiguity. "You wanted to speak to my manager?" I asked. She was incensed. "I want my money." "You asked to speak with my manager," I continued. "The owner. The person in charge. You wanted someone with more authority than the person you were speaking to, and you have been speaking with the owner. There is no one above me in this building. So, we've come to the limit of what I can offer. If you want someone with authority over me, the only recourse is to involve the state. You are now effectively speaking with law enforcement. You are free to explain to them why you brought a firearm into a retail establishment over a receipt dispute." I maintained a level tone, because if I allowed fear to creep in, I would have lost my composure. I nodded toward the phone just enough for her to notice it without realizing I was signaling. The regular slid his phone slightly closer and said more clearly, "The individual is holding a gun." The customer's face went pale. You could see the dawning realization battling with her pride. She had maneuvered herself into the very situation she thought she could intimidate her way past. She said, "I'm not threatening anyone. This is my right." I replied, "You are brandishing a weapon in a place of business and using it to demand money. That is not a right." She began to panic. She raised the gun higher, not yet pointing at anyone, but the movement was enough for the person in the aisle to duck and another customer to cry out. I raised my hands higher above the counter now, as if to show I was unarmed and holding a losing hand. The next few seconds seemed to expand, slowing down time. And then, help arrived. I heard the sirens first, followed by the doors bursting open with the frightening efficiency you only see from people trained for such events. The police didn't ask questions or offer warnings beyond shouted commands. They saw a person in a store with a gun in hand, raised just enough to make every hair on my neck stand on end. They ordered her to drop it, but she just turned, looking bewildered. The first taser struck her before she could fully grasp that things were not going her way. She collapsed. The gun clattered across the floor. They descended on her instantly, a flurry of hands securing, handcuffing, and yelling instructions. The room seemed to zoom out. My body acted on its own, stepping back with my hands still raised because it felt like the right thing for them to see. The regular also raised both his hands, phone still active, as if we were extras in a crime drama. The other customers stayed pressed against the walls. It was finished in a matter of seconds. The lead officer looked at me and asked, "Is anyone injured?" I shook my head. It took a moment for my words to catch up with my brain. I said, "She pulled a gun over a return." The officer blinked, as if he'd heard both everything and nothing at all. They separated us to take our statements, and I gave mine deliberately. I recounted her first visit, her threats, her return with a fraudulent receipt, the product test, the "get your manager" exchange, the moment she drew the weapon, the 911 call, my de-escalation attempt, the taser, and the arrest. They asked if I wished to press charges. I replied, yes. Absolutely, yes. I didn't just want her removed from my store, I wanted a formal record, a clear boundary establishing that you cannot treat people this way and simply get away with it. They took the gun as evidence and inquired about security cameras. Yes, I have them. I never imagined I'd need them for this, but I now had 4 camera angles that captured the entire event. They reviewed a few seconds of footage to corroborate the story. One officer commented, This is extremely helpful, and I felt a strange sense of pride in my camera setup, a feeling I never anticipated. As they led her away, she was muttering, to me, to them, to no one in particular. She kept insisting she hadn't threatened anyone, that she was merely trying to get customer service, that she hadn't even aimed the gun at anyone. The officer escorting her said, "Please stop talking." But she continued. The door closed, the sirens receded, and the adrenaline crash hit me like a physical blow. I started shaking. The regular placed a hand on the counter and asked, "Are you all right?" I said something clever like, "I think I need to sit down." And I did. I sat on the stool behind the counter and focused on breathing, as if I'd just completed a marathon. Then, because that's who I am, I took out my incident report form and began to write. My hand was trembling, but I wrote anyway. Details fade quickly after an event like that. The day became surreal. We remained closed for a while but kept the lights on, as officers still needed to gather statements from everyone and ensure the area was secure. I made coffee that I never drank, and then I called my spouse. My voice cracked, because until that moment, I had been holding myself together with sheer will and store policies. Her charges, by the way, were substantial, based on what I was told and what later became public record. She was charged with brandishing a firearm, assault with a deadly weapon, because she used a gun to coerce me into giving her money. It doesn't have to be fired to be a threat, menacing, and a few lesser charges for resisting arrest when they cuffed her because she struggled. Resisting may sound intense, but it can be as simple as pulling your arms away. It doesn't pair well with a brandishing charge, though. All told, I heard she spent some time in jail. I applied for a restraining order, which was granted on a temporary basis and later made permanent for a period after a brief hearing. By permanent, I mean for a specified number of years. Lawyers appreciate precision. The terms were straightforward: she is not allowed near me, my store, or my staff, she cannot contact us, and she cannot post about us online with the intent to cause harm. Some people believe restraining orders are ineffective, but they are not. They provide police with the immediate authority to act the moment someone appears where they are forbidden. She had repeatedly demanded to speak with someone of higher authority than their underling before her. She wanted someone who would bend the rules for her, based on nothing more than the force of her own voice. She demanded a manager, then an owner, and then someone even higher. I complied. I put on my owner tag. I told her, calmly and unequivocally, that I was the highest authority in that building. There was truly no one above me within those walls who could grant her wish. She didn't accept that answer, though, and she persisted anyway. The only authority superior to the owner in that situation was the law. Anyway, thank you for reading. If you learn anything from this, let it be this: when someone insists on speaking to your manager, ensure they grasp what that truly entails. Sometimes, the manager wears a badge. The next story is titled, "You Need to Tie Your Hair Up," from our Malicious Compliance. During the 1970s, my father was employed by the Royal Mail, the British Postal Service, as a postman. Like many men of that era, he had long hair that fell just below his shoulders. His superiors took issue with this and instructed him to sort his hair out and tie it up if he wasn't going to get it cut. Now, my father is a bit of a character, which served him well here. He went home that day and told my mother, who agreed to wake up early to style his hair for him before he left for work. The following day, he arrived at work sporting the most charming pigtails, fastened with bright pink ribbons. My dad greeted his manager, stated he had tied his hair up as instructed, and then proceeded to do his route. He wore the pigtails for an entire week until he returned after a weekend off with his hair down and was never hassled about it again. And our final story comes from our petty revenge. It's titled, "I'm sorry I'm not moving this fallen tree limb blocking the road fast enough for you. Let me just move it from in front of my car to in front of yours." So, after a series of major storms, I was on my way to work, and a woman had been following me a little too closely. It wasn't extreme, but it was irritating me since it was still raining and the roads were slick. She was driving a nice car and appeared to be middle-aged. I came across a substantial branch on the road. I suppose it was technically a limb. I'm not clear on the distinction between a branch and a limb. In any case, it was a large enough piece that I believed I could pull it to the side of the road. I got out of my car and, with considerable effort, began to shift it. Halfway through, the woman honked her horn. I looked at her, thinking she might be trying to signal some kind of danger, but she just raised her hands in a "well, what's happening" gesture. I pointed to the large tree limb, trying not to exaggerate its size with each retelling, as if to say, "Do you not see this huge thing I'm trying to move?" She just threw her hands up higher and then slapped them down on her steering wheel, or at least that's how I perceived it. During my struggle, I got the limb wedged against a fire hydrant, and I was getting frustrated and soaked, and this person behind me honked once more. I finally managed to wrangle the limb to the side, but then I continued to drag it behind my vehicle, effectively repositioning the heavy, thick end back into the road, directly in her path. Well, I wish I could say I had the nerve to look her in the eye, but the second I dropped it, I realized how petty my actions were. I felt a pang of shame and mentally chided myself for wasting time on this. I hurried back to my car and drove away. When I guiltily peeked in my rearview mirror, she hadn't gotten out or moved her car and was still there when I looked again before turning the corner. And yes, everyone, thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe, and I will see you again.